right, folks, we are live, and Mr. Borg just jumped in, but I didn't want to just throw him on screen right away. But welcome all of you brave degenerates who are joining us at 11:30 at night here for our recap of the quarterfinal game against Villanova and all the other action in the FCS. You may have heard of one of the other scores already. And get prepped for our 6 o'clock game on Friday while we have the Idaho and Albany game going. Yeah, I did it. Albany. It's Albany. I hate when people
Albany.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. But they're going on right now. I believe Idaho might have just kicked a field goal.
Kicked a field goal, 19 to 14, with 4:33 left in the third quarter.
Yep, and there was a huge fumble by Albany as they were driving down the field. Got a first down. Semi-similar to the Zach Hines fumble that happened in the Jacks game. But no, so we got that going. I can probably throw that up on the split screen if we really want to. But I do want to throw one quick update up there for everybody in B Team Mafia who has been so generous helping us out with Alex's lemonade stand and Cubbies and everything else that goes with that. So I'm going to go ahead and try pulling that up here quick because our boy Brian Williams is in first place by well north of $2,000 now. Efton Chisholm was hanging there for a second, but through the generosity of all of you folks, and I'm sharing the wrong screen, but because why wouldn't I? But we are now on top comfortably because of all of the generosity of you folks here that are part of B Team Mafia, with the pudding shots at tailgates, the fireball shots at tailgates, everything in between, the donations, the drive we did with Cubbies for the Italian nachos. I went and got some today, and that's not even including the $2 per Italian nachos that Cubbies is donating. So awesome work, all of you. Thank you so much. We're going to keep trying to drive this number up because it's for kids' cancer, and fighting childhood cancer. So why the heck wouldn't we keep pushing to get that number up there? So, and obviously we do have our other guys on there, Quentin Hicks and the one and only Mark Gronowski. So I think we've got a comfortable lead for the moment. I might consider throwing some money at those guys to move them up the leaderboard as well, because why would we want to have any of our guys lose to a USD or NDSU player? But I just wanted to get a quick shout out there. Everybody, you have been phenomenal with donating. We're going to keep this going all the way through the national title game. Let's see if we can get everybody up to a couple grand. That would be great. I know Brian Williams, I believe, I don't know if they've added it yet or not, but he gets an extra $1,000 for getting over the $5,000 mark. So that is really exciting. But beyond that, you had your tailgate show in the Dana today. If you haven't checked that, check that out. They have it on the Dakota News Now website. I highly recommend checking it out. You guys do a great job.
Thank you. It's been quite a run. This is something I've kind of always wanted to do the last couple of years. Certainly having two very highly ranked teams made it a lot easier. Having a national champion team coming back, defending a title, having another team that was very highly ranked in the thing made it a lot easier to sell. Certainly the greatest, I think the greatest year of college football that this state has seen all around, really. Made it very easy to sell, I think, this. And we'll continue next week. We're going to have a pregame show again. Not really sure how it's going to work. We might do it Thursday. We might do it like 4 o'clock-ish on Friday. We usually kind of plan this out. They'll start talking about it Sunday. It's kind of above my head, but Sunday we'll do some kind of live element Friday night, whether it's just me with a microphone down there, whether I'm hanging out up here. I also mentioned we did have a post-game show as well, which was kind of a wild experience, a different kind of post-game show than our normal one here. Which was very wild. Not to match the Coyote Bison game, unfortunately, which was to give you an idea, I was at the press conference for the SDSU game. It takes them a little while to get off the field, and the losing team went first, in this case, Villanova. And actually, the SDSU one went pretty quick. Jimmy's remarks were pretty quick. I'm kind of kicking myself because I forgot to ask him if he would be rooting at all for Eck tonight. But obviously we'll have all week now to ask him that if they win. We'll get into those questions. Whole team got whatever. We'll get into that. I think you should probably be giving more credit to NDSU for the way they played as opposed to USD. But no, that game, we were in the press conference and it was just going to half, and I left and I'd run back into the stadium to pick up my recorder, which recorded the ESPN feed. And I think as I was getting in there, the second half was starting. And by the time I got back to the station, there was only like 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So it was kind of typical Bison football of old, where they just grind the clock out. We were supposed to go on at 4:30. ABC was supposed to fill the programming up to 4:30. I think the game finished at like 4:15. And we were informed about 10 minutes early that, no, we're going to cut out now. So you guys got to go on early. Bye.
Wow, that'll throw you into panic.
Yeah, and I actually I gotta do one thing here. You're probably not getting my best mic sound here because I don't think I have my earbuds plugged in. There we go.
Oh, whoopsies.
There we go. Been that kind of a day. That might be a little better. I was kind of having trouble hearing you, so that explains why. But no, so that's I hadn't quite finished I just gotten back. I'd plugged in all my my longer post game a bunch of sound from SDSU. Obviously, we weren't going live from SDSU because the game had been over at this point for 2 hours and everybody had gone home. But yeah, that was it was not convenient to be told we're going on 10 minutes earlier when I still have several. I had a board of stats that I wanted to run from SDSU, and I didn't get a chance to actually finish filling it out, and that made air. So it was just a blank. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, and I had some tease video. This was kind of a stupid one. I should have just filled out the same video I was going to use anyway, but somehow showed old Taryn Christian video. So at least I had SDSU video for SDSU tease video. It was but it was actually a very good live. We had a very good live post game show. Considering obviously it would have helped if USD we would have had more fun if USD had won, or at least made it more of a game. Although I'm sure Jackrabbit fans on here probably enjoyed the outcome one way or the other. If it was if somebody got embarrassed one way or the other.
Well, we have a lot of Jacks fans that are like, I was rooting for Team Meteor, and I'm sitting back watching that game going, I'm happy no matter what happens. Really, it's a win-win. Somebody's gonna lose.
Well, and it was one of those things. And I know we had a good live show. Mark was down there. We're actually able to interview some people. Brendan Webb, who was kind of one of my favorite characters. He was a great lineman for them this season. It was always really good soundbite. Came right out of the locker room and talked to them. To his credit, because obviously most guys don't really want to come out of a locker room right after you lose. And that was his final game, and had some really good words to the end of the season. So really stand-up kid for him to come out at the end and kind of face the music a little bit and talk. And we took the press conferences from NDSU, mostly from NDSU. They went first, a little bit from USD at the tail end. Spoke to Gray Zabel, actually, the Pier native, who obviously had their offensive line was terrific, and they've kind of had a resurgence on that point. And so, obviously we had a lot of Bison coverage, which I'm sure made some people. We don't cater to too many NDSU folks around here these days anymore. Not as much as we don't get as many NDSU requests as we used to 10 years ago. I wonder why, but times have changed a little bit for those folks. But it was. It was, and then we had a long SDSU segment as well. The weird thing that we weren't allowed to do was air highlights from either game. There's an NCAA restriction that we're not allowed to air the highlights unless it's a regular newscast. So this was part of it, although there weren't many highlights from USD to air. The only thing I could really air for SDSU was the video I shot before the game. I took some of the still photos I shot and kind of mashed them into a little thing, and then just video of the team coming off the field afterward. And that was my highlight video. And then I just put together a long, about 1:41 of sound bites. And I even included a comment from the Delaware coach, because I had asked him a question about, well, what is it? because they were, let's be honest, they're the first team probably since Montana State to really give SDSU that's the latest. I think SDSU's trailed in the game since Montana State. They never trailed at SIU. It was.
Oh, you mean the Villanova coach?
Yeah, the Villanova coach.
Okay.
What did I say?
Delaware.
No, my bad. I'm getting confused with the opponents here, CAA opponents here. But no, Villanova. That was the latest SDSU I think has trailed in the game. To my knowledge, since Montana State, and obviously they were ahead by the only other really close game that beyond Montana State was SIU, but they never trailed in that game. And I asked him, well, what's it going to take to play a quarter game and beat that team for somebody to do that? He said, basically his comment was, you have to almost play a perfect game. And you probably need some luck, a few bounces, some turnovers, and you have to play turnover-free football, but they just don't beat them. They don't make mistakes. So that is all, by the way, that is all on the website as well, because we didn't use any of the NCAA licensed stuff, so that's all posted. And it was a pretty good couple hours of broadcasting, well, even despite the fact that one game was an epic clunker. But the Jacks, I think it was a good day. It's been a great run so far with these shows, and we'll have at least one more, and fairly confident we'll have more heading into Frisco, but you never know. Obviously, I was certainly guilty of looking ahead to, next week in some of my discussions with people this week, and I can do that. I'm a media guy here, but I also have kind of cautioned people. I'm like, well, remember Holy Cross a year ago gave them kind of a tough time in the quarterfinal, and this was the reminder that it's no matter how good you are in the regular season, there tends to be a moment or two in the playoffs where it's tough again, and this is where it got tough again.
Right, and let's be honest, a couple of things. A lot of people are asking about the wind, especially if you weren't there. When you are, wind is the one type of weather that does not show very well on a broadcast. So if you were watching that game and you weren't there, and you just see, oh, it's 29 mile an hour wind, that's not the worst. Well, yeah, but it was 50 mile an hour gusts, and it wasn't. I don't know what the baseline is in the meteorological world of what's the differentiation between a gust and your base wind or any of that, but it was screaming. We put up our tailgate, just for people to understand. We put up our tailgate at 6 a.m. This is before the wind advisory hit. It was just windy. It wasn't horrible windy. We put it up at 6 a.m. There was 6 guys. If we have 6 guys setting up our pop-up tents, it takes roughly 25 minutes. And we've got walls, 2 tents up, or 3 tents up, walls staked in. We're moving stuff in, and we're pretty much done. It took us an hour and a half just to get the tents up with walls on them. And that was with people holding the tents down. We probably shouldn't have put them up, to be honest with you. It was dangerous. You'd see, everybody inside that tent, and there was a lot of people because there wasn't many who put tents up, was if you had a drink and you could reach and had some weight under you, you were holding on to the supports just to give it a little bit extra hold down. It was nuts. And in that game and in the stadium, the way the Dana's set up, it's not blowing just one way. It swirls, and I mean like crazy. The flagpole in that northeast corner where we sit would in under a minute change and hit every direction around the flagpole at one point in under a minute. And it was screaming. People were making fun of the punter for Villanova for his first punt that hit the back of his own player. I promise you that happened because a wind gust came up when he dropped the ball, and it moved that ball just in the drop of his punt off of his foot. And that's why he flubbed that punt so bad, because they're just dropping it. They're not throwing it down to their leg or anything. It's just a drop. And there was enough wind to affect his drop to his foot. That was part of that was part of the problem. And you couldn't see it on TV. And you get these people from Montana, oh, we played in the snow. Yeah, you know what? Straight down snow is not a huge issue. Sorry to burst your bubble, unless you're from Montana State, and then apparently our snow is different than their snow. But In which case, by the way, Montana State fans, you should probably recognize that the wind was terrible. But Brian Thompson here, he says we didn't look unbeatable so much anymore, and those pesky and Bison are playing football again. Dear Lord, you better all hope SDSU doesn't lose to NDSU in Frisco because, well, I think you know. On that, and we talk about weather being the great equalizer. These teams, you could not pass over 10 yards in this game. You couldn't. There was one throw that Mark, each team made one throw downfield. One was intercepted. One was by Mark, and it was a beautiful ball. You could see it in the air. It was going to the back corner, and you could watch the trajectory of the ball change once it got up out from behind the protection of the S-Jack, and it went 10 yards left into the middle of the field and about 10 yards deeper, which saved it from being an interception, but there was no hope of making any downfield passing plays. I do think the SDSU offensive staff was a little bit too cautious about throwing at first, and the Nova defense was able to just sit on the run game too much. However, that being said, I wouldn't call this necessarily a clunker. I'd call the first half a clunker. I don't think the 605 Hogs had. I think they'd probably tell you they didn't have that wasn't their favorite game. Our guy Quentin Hicks on here, he was definitely a spark plug in that second half. He was being nasty, man. And there was a couple times I'm like, "Whoa, buddy, back her down 10-20," and then we got a flag. That's all right. You want nasty O-line, especially in a game like that with some Philly boys. And I think too. This will be my last thing, and you can talk on the game a little bit from what you saw. But when we're in the MVFC here, right, and we consider ourselves the best conference, I think part of the problem of wanting to talk up your conference and chest thump about your conference as much as the MVFC and the Big Sky teams do is you forget that there are other decent teams. We saw what Furman did with Montana, and Montana looked like they were destined to be a problem for SDSU. Our friend Brian here was telling me the whole time, I think Montana is going to be a serious problem for you guys. And then they almost lose in overtime to Furman. And honestly, if they don't have special teams, huge special teams plays, they probably lose that game. I mean, their offense only scored 14 points that game. So I don't think these other conferences and these other teams that have good records a lot of times are as bad as people think, but I also don't think that sometimes teams are as good as they think. It's somewhere in between. And Nova was a real football team. They were not a joke. They were physical. They were violent at the line of scrimmage. They brought their pads to pop. Their quarterback, you could tell he was not comfortable being accurate necessarily in that short range, short game. He liked to chuck it deep and let his playmakers make plays, which is why he had two receivers averaging 25 yards of reception, which is Looney Tunes. But I think he was really good with his legs. He made a lot of plays with his legs. He was phenomenal at running the read option and reading it, not just giving it or predetermining he's going to pull it. He actually read that end really, really well. It was tough to see where the ball was with that. And, the defense adjusted. The defense did, I think, a fine job in this game, especially in some bad situations. But that was a real team, and they really came to play. And I think Albany is showing that right now. Furman showed it already for the SoCon. A lot of teams that got dismissed out of hand were a little bit better than people thought. And now we are boiled down to probably the teams we were kind of expecting if Idaho holds on here. But yeah, and who knows? I feel bad for Brian. You bet an outdoor football game in this time of year, and something snaps up like weather that was like that. I'm telling you, people, I was colder at this game than I was at the Montana State game last year by far, and it wasn't because I was underdressed. The only more miserable experience I had was the UNI Hobo Day game in 2014 when it rained and it was like 40 degrees or something and raining, but that was because I was only in a hooded sweatshirt. This was miserable all game. It never quit. Shout out to my daughter and her friend. They're 11 and they stuck it out almost to the very end. They made it till there was like 5 minutes left in the game, which rock stars being that age and sticking it out through that. And they were running to the bathrooms to warm up, running back in, and shout out to them. I thought the crowd, for the weather, to set a playoff attendance in that weather is a huge step, I think, for the fan base. I'm sure it was a disappointing number for the team, and Montana fans are going to go and beat their chests and all that stuff. But if we take all their talk and then add $2 to it, you have $2. So I think it was good crowd. They were very into it. And there's a huge amount of excitement for this game. I already had like 9 tickets requested from me.
Well, and technically Montana had 5,000 no-show, or 5 to 7,000 no-shows last night as well. I mean, it was 20,000, but it was, I mean, again, semantics, but wasn't a sellout on their end. I mean, and I think Missoula, I got my computer up here, and they are going to the fourth quarter now, by the way. It's still 19-14. So we are still, Albany's still in this thing. It's very much in doubt as we wait to see. It's going to probably happen live while we're on air here. Who SDSU will be moving on.
If it gets spicy, I'll throw it up on the screen.
Oh yeah, no, I might as well Google this now because I always say this. I know it's not always an excuse, but populations do matter. And Missoula, Montana is population is 74,000. So you're talking about? That's 3, almost 4 times the size of Brookings. I mean, people do. I'm not saying I don't always like to use that as an excuse, but there are a few more people. And I lived in Missoula for a while. I worked out there for about a year. I also know what you're saying too about the snow. I can tell Montana people this too. For those who went to the 2009 Brawl of the Wild with Montana State, that is the kind of weather game that we had today, where it wasn't snowing, but you had like a hard wind and it was just biting and it was nasty. And they lost that game to Montana State. That was the end of their 20-year playoff streak. It wasn't 2009. It was actually 2010. My mistake. Obviously, 2009 is a year I'm sure Jackrabbit fans do not want referenced for
you don't talk about
reasons. Yeah. Well, we will if they end up meeting up here in a few weeks. It's going to be kind of inevitable, considering the head coaching matchup alone. But I think it was actually a record crowd today. 10,000 plus is the playoff record. I guess that wasn't. I didn't get what the crowd count was for Mercer, but But again, when you have, I say this with Vermilion. I say, and you have a 19,000 seat stadium, so it's tougher to fill. But when you're relying on more people to travel because your city is smaller, you are going to have these instances where if the weather's bad or, people just aren't going to show up. There are instances where, again, if my wife didn't want to bring my son who's 3, I don't want him out in this weather. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Unless they're up in a suite, which unfortunately we don't quite have that we can get that for the pregame show, but they kick us out once the real fun begins. So, I get why some people can't, but it was, I'm seeing the weather reports. I've seen 40, but it could be precipitation. I agree. It felt colder today. Didn't help that I didn't have my main coat, but my main coat's more of a liner, so it didn't really matter. I was all right. I had somebody offer me gloves. I don't tend to work real well with gloves because I always have to kind of use, whether I'm taking pictures or using a camera. But I kind of, I was able to use the heater on the sidelines a little bit. I went back and forth in between. I went in the student center up to the press box. So I wasn't always, it's not that hard of a thing for me. I played football in the cold and, I'm a little warm blooded. I don't know. This felt colder because I think there was more wind and it was really biting. And I posted a video at the start of the day before we started our pregame show. And we were in the athletic director's suite. So there was a little bit of a wall, but when you stepped outside, like people were probably wondering, why don't you go do it in the tailgate lots? We did in the tailgate lots, aside from the fact we don't necessarily have like the means of a college game day to control crowd and have a nice setup. If we did in the tailgate lots, all you would have heard was because it's just nothing but wind. I had a tough time driving because I left early thinking there was going to be some precipitation. The roads might be slick. The roads were fine, but I felt like I was driving against a wall at times. So it was rough. That was that was a lot of wind. That's one of the windier. Reminded me of the game that they played the first time against Villanova in 2016. I think that one had a little more actual snow, but and the score was eerily similar for a lot of the game because that was 10-7 and that was for the whole game. The field goal kickers were pretty good in this game too. They hit. I mean, granted they had the wind at their back and the ones they hit, but still, when you never know in a game like that. Yeah, I mean, it was just. I do kind of agree. I've seen some posts on here about the play calling. Jacks had the wind at their back in the first quarter, and it was really kind of I was a little puzzled by some of the play calling because they were not aggressive when they had the wind at their back.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed they definitely were when they came out in the third quarter. They probably would have scored on the opening drive if not for the ball that got punched out of Zach's hands. Or, that was a good play from the Villanova guy. I don't know that. That's the second time it's happened to Hines. I don't know what you tell him. I mean, that was a good play. I don't know if you tell him to cover up with two hands, but it's going to happen occasionally. I mean, we've seen it happen to the best tight ends in the NFL. So
he had the ball.
They were going to go. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I was kind of up in the stands watching when it happened, so I didn't get a great look at it. The UNI one was a little more forgivable because they were kind of up big in that game, and but this was I knew. I think I tweeted it out. I'm like, they have to score with the wind at their back because if they're trailing going into the fourth quarter into the wind, that's not necessarily a winning formula here, especially with the way the punters were struggling. But man, it's I'll have to. We'll see. I don't know if you had. We got to make the Frisco plans first. First of all, we got to get to Frisco. Let's not put the cart ahead of the horse today. We almost, as people were probably thinking about that when it was 6-3 for a while. No, I agree with you. And we do kind of forget there are other conferences out there, and some of this has also been tinged by the fact of how good this SDSU team has been. B, what we've seen over the years from North Dakota State, who just seems to kill everybody, no matter who they are. There are a lot of really, there are good teams. We've all dumped on the SoCon. Furman was good. Furman was a really good team. Somebody was saying the difference was Junior Bergen last night, and it certainly was. But
yes,
I'll say the other difference was the fact they lost to a 1-9 football team because they should have been playing a home game last night. They should have been. The brackets should have been a lot different. If they beat Furman, they're at least probably the 4 seed. Maybe the 3. Maybe they vault USD and they're the 3 seed. USD's the 4 seed. Probably maybe USD's playing Albany right now. Who knows? I mean, we'll have that discussion. I saw people, the SoCon, you can't tell us we're not a good conference. And okay, but you still haven't gotten past this hurdle yet. It was there for the taking. And, I don't want to dump on them after a good game because that's probably the best SoCon team we've seen come out of that league since it had its guts ripped out a decade ago. But if you can't, when you have a chance to get a home game and a high seed, you have to do it, especially against a 1-9 football team. And that, to me, that's where that team costs itself because they should probably be a semifinalist today. There's no guarantee. I mean, obviously, I think if North Dakota State had gone to Furman, maybe the same thing would have happened out in Furman that happened today in Vermilion. There's no guarantee, but you like your chances better when you're at home as opposed to having to go to Missoula, having to go to Brookings, having to go to Fargo. But yeah, and Villanova's been a great. We forget Villanova's one of the last teams prior to the Dakota takeover that began in the 2010s. They won the 2009 national title. They beat Montana, even though they're a basketball school. They've always had really good football. They've played competitive playoff games with SDSU. They were the first game at Dana. I thought they played better in this game than they did a couple years ago when they were the home team, quite frankly, in Philadelphia. I thought although that game was tied at one point, but I think SDSU kind of dominated the second half. 2 holes on one side. I didn't notice that. I did notice what somebody was saying earlier about the papers that got not sideline. I noticed there was like a confetti of papers, and I realized
their
that
play
was
sheets. Their play sheets. It happened down kind of in front of us, and we watched it happen. They were blowing all over. I'm like, oh my god, this could be. And they were blown into the field. I was wondering if they're going to blow the plate at it because if the rest of them, it would have been 100 sheets of paper that blew out there.
Oh,
and
man.
I have a flagpole off the back of my pickup that I put up, and I didn't put it up maybe a quarter of the way, and it ripped both flags off my flagpole. I had just an end caught on that I was able to snag my flags and put it back in. But Villanova, something
I
people
was very
forget.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, something people forget. It's a little bit like UND hockey, except I don't think they share quite as much. But when you have a program like Villanova basketball, that's that top tier, there's going to be some carryover into your other programs when it comes to strength and conditioning and things along those lines, that you're going to get top notch, borderline FBS, strength coaching, things like that, just by virtue of what that program brings to that school. That's part of why the Dayton rule exists, because they didn't want, St. Thomas having a D3 football school while they had a D1 facilities for all their other sports. And it's something to keep in mind. That's part of why Villanova's been good forever under Andy Talley and now their new coach.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute there. Yeah, and actually, it looks like Albany is trying to review a thing.
That it looks like a catch. I'm gonna share it on here.
If this is a catch, I think that's gonna be a catch. Yeah, I think he's got control.
His foot is in.
Of course, you only need 1 foot. You only need 1 foot in the NCAA. If this stands, they're gonna be down to the Idaho 15. They're trailing by 5. There's still a lot of time left right now. There's 13 minutes, so we got a lot of machinations yet to. I agree, Zach. You also have a very good name as well. It's been a great, with the exception of the game in Vermilion. Thanks, yes. Coyotes. Jesus.
Hey, 3 for 4 games is really good. That's a really good number for a playoff of this size, to have 3 out of 4 really fun games.
Well, I think we all kind of thought there was probably going to be one blowout. We probably thought it was going to be Furman. I don't think a lot of people thought Furman would go into Missoula and hold up, and they did. I think, I will get to USD in a minute. We obviously want to finish off with as we're waiting they gave him the catch. So right now it looks like Albany's in position to maybe go ahead here. But all sorts of pieces of Coyotes. Well, yeah, rough for the Coyotes. Their 2 biggest sellout crowds, and they just got mopped in both games. But again, still a good season for them. You can't. We'll get more into them later, but that's rough especially when you're trying to, you get your sellout crowds, you get a good atmosphere, and that happens. But obviously it goes to what we were saying, and close. Goes to what a lot of us said. We thought this could be a team that would win 6 to 7, 8 games, get into the playoffs, but they're still, when it comes to consistently competing with the bigger echelon, which is being on the level of SDSU and NDSU, they can beat them occasionally, and they have with both SDSU and NDSU, but they need to get more depth to do it consistently. And it showed right away because they came into this game without Barros, their top cornerback, who got hurt right away in the Sacramento game. And I was kind of of course I was in the press conference and kind of wrapping up the SDSU game. And the one thing that struck me with the USD game is, well, how are they giving up these big pass plays? Because they were forcing 3rd and longs. Like this should be where you want NDSU to be. The first play of the game in that USD game was a 14-yard sack. Like, this is perfect for the Coyotes. But then they gave up like 38, 43. And that's, Cole Payton's had some. And then you realize, like, oh, wait, their top cornerback's out. And that's something we've kind of said a few times on this program is, their depth is probably not good. If they start taking injuries, they're not like SDSU. They're not like NDSU. They're not going to run 2 or 3 deep. If they take a lot of injuries, it's going to bite them. And it started this. I'm not saying it would have led to a win today, but eventually in this game, Mogensen went out. Gaze went out. Bauman was getting killed. I'm surprised I thought he should have probably left after the first really bad shot he took. Today became an emphasis in depth, and that's where they're going to have to continue to build if they're going to ever. And that's what but that's where SDSU was at one time too. As much as I can see the Jackrabbit fans who want to make fun of them, we remember where they were when James Madison took them to school, when the Bison took them to school in a couple of those playoff games. If you don't have that depth, it's gonna pay. You're gonna pay, and it takes time, and they're not there yet.
I think USD was very fortunate this year in injury front, as
Very,
unfortunate
very.
as they were last year with everything that went on. They were that fortunate this year with the schedule they had, not having injuries. I think they did a good job. And this actually, there's a holistic football question actually for me that extends from this when it comes to USD, Furman, what you're seeing teams start to do. They brought in a coach on offense that played complementary football for his defense. Like they recognized that, hey, we don't have an offense to score 45 points a game and leave our defense on the field all game because we're running a spread offense, and we can't do that. That's not a winning formula for us. So they went to what SDSU and NDSU have successfully done, and they slowed the game down, made a complementary offense. I think a little bit of what was a telltale sign that it was possible that they'd get blown. I didn't think they were going to get blown out, but what made it seem possible that it would happen is when your margin of victory compared to the rest of the playoff teams, particularly when two of them play in your conference and you're the lowest of the 8 teams left and everybody else is in double digits or really close for your average margin of victory for scores. It kind of tells me that you're just hanging in there, and you're winning and you're playing winning ball. But if it gets out of behind on you, like happened on the SDSU game, you're in trouble. And I think that showed itself a little bit as well, on top of the injuries.
Well, and you're right. As somebody said, they were playing scared. I mean, I don't agree with that. I think because right away, their first drive after they gave up the touchdown, they went right down the field. They couldn't finish, but they got a field goal. So right away, they came out. And that's the thing, too. I still saw that there were opportunities for chunk plays against it. They still made chunk plays. So I still don't think this is the code green, unbelievable. Although the Wisniewski kid is turning into probably the top safety, one of the top safeties. And I think he's rated by Pro Football Focus right now as the number 1 safety at any level. But there were still chunk play opportunities there to be had the whole game. They went right down the field, drive stalled, they kick a field goal at 7-3, but then they immediately give up another touchdown on one of Peyton's long runs. The problem is they just started getting behind, and you're right, they're not an offensive team that's built to be chasing scores. It's what they did in that first game with them. That first NDSU game there were only 6 possessions, but they got out to the 21-3 lead. They didn't, and when they've been blown out in the previous NDSU meetings, the Bison went right down the field and scored like that, instantly put them behind the 8 ball. You're chasing points, and you can't chase against NDSU. They're just going to grind you down. So I think once that I think then I don't think they were playing scared, but I do think once they're chasing points, then you can't run the football. And we know NDSU has had some weaknesses against just direct runs up the middle at times. You had to basically throw the run game out the window at that point. Then you give up a punt return touchdown. It just spiraled. And at that point, with their offense, they were not built. Knowing what they have this year, the offensive line struggled. Those struggles had been present at times this year. They had good games. They had bad games. It's still very much a work in progress. Like I said, I think to make a leap, a lot of us thought they could be a 6 to 8 win team. So to win 10 games, get to the quarterfinals, I think exceeded expectations. And, I've seen a lot, too. I keep seeing the whole, they had the weakest schedule. I get it. They played the 3 bottom-feeding teams, but they also beat every team that qualified as an at-large in the conference. And, they didn't – it's not like they ducked out on a team that made the playoffs. The other 3 teams they didn't play, does anyone really think the results would have been that much different if they played Missouri State, Illinois State, or UNI? If they'd subbed one of those 3 in? Those maybe if they play UNI because although they've actually been kind of deep. Other than that game last year, they've had some games where they went to I remember 2021, they went to the Unidome and won. So I get people want to fixate on the whole. They got to play like next year. SDSU is playing at Murray State. Are you going to, if some Bison fan comes at you guys next year and says, you guys got to play Murray State and we did. So it's like, you play who you play. I think if they hadn't played every playoff team in the league, then there would have been a little more of a point to that. But they played every playoff team,
right?
I mean,
I think
Missouri's, yeah.
I think you get that from SDSU fans because SDSU is the only team in the conference who didn't get to play in Indiana State, Murray State, or Western Illinois,
but I think we all know it wouldn't.
NDSU got to do it too,
But I think we all know it wouldn't have mattered with this SDSU team. Like,
right?
I remember that was kind of a funny point that got brought up with Stig last year. Somebody, it was actually a member of the Fargo media, brought it up Stig last year at the. And by the way, if you are following a little bit, we got it on here. Albany got down there and kicked a field goal, so it's a 2-point game. Somebody brought it up with Stig last year, and he's like, "Oh, we don't have them on our schedule." And somebody told him, "John, I don't think it's going to matter much for you guys." Right. Like this team was going to run through every. The one thing that you could, I think, legitimately say was a difference there is that it seemed like toward the end of the season, like every team SDSU played got to play against, and in one of those three right before they played.
Yes,
it was almost like they got the bye week before playing SDSU. But again, this team was so well stacked that it wasn't really going to matter. Other teams that they'll have in the future, younger teams, maybe that's a different deal. But yeah, I mean, it just, I like I said, it's and of course they're a rival, so there's always going to be that part of the fan base that's just never going to always want to give them the crap and never want to give them the credit. I understand that, but it's like, but yeah, like to think that because they played those three teams, like unless you really think Missouri State, UNI, or Illinois State was that deserving of a playoff spot, and they weren't. And I don't think things would have been much different if they had played one of those three or all of those three teams. Obviously I know their non-conference wasn't great, but they also played Missouri, so it's not like they were obligated to go out and play, somebody super tough. They played the super tough one a year ago, and that didn't do anything for them either. So, I think their schedule was fine.
I think Jordan does bring up a fair comment, which I think helps with their having less injuries this year. Was you missed it? It's not that I think those teams would have beat them, but if you play Western Illinois or Murray State, and you've got a guy who's questionable, you rest him because you're going to smoke that team. So who cares? Instead of we're going to the Unidome. We need you at least for a half to win this game. And it's an attrition thing. In the end, you're right. It doesn't matter. Like in the end,
I will say the only one that I think they really did that, they could have done that against was Western. And of course, that's not going to be an issue moving forward because now Western's gone.
Right.
But the Indiana State game, they kind of sleptwalked through. That was a game that was a 4-quarter game. They only won that 17-3. And then the Murray State game, they were kind of in control of, but they didn't really pull away till the fourth. So, and I'll be honest, I didn't think Murray State was that bad this year. I mean, they didn't have a great record, but I saw them a lot, and I'm like, they're not Western. They're not as bad as Indiana.
Right.
They had some players. You can tell they were not as bad as they were being at. Like, I would rather have them over Western. I mean, again, I realize Western is a low bar right now, but I'm like, I see a little more here than what we were being told we were getting. So, yeah, I agree. Murray was scrappy. I love their quarterback, too. I mean, frankly, that was the reason I thought USD might have more problem with Sacramento because they had the mobile quarterback. But, yeah, I think that's a good point about the fact that, that did give USD maybe a little more of a chance to rest up. It certainly gave them a good springboard into the playoffs to play Western because they've been struggling offensively going into that game, and they got a get right game going into their bye week. And then of course they came right out of it and they looked pretty good on offense against Sacramento. But as much as we want to diss USD or say what went wrong with the Coyotes, the two other things are it's the old cliche. It's always tough to beat a team a second time, especially that team, because I'm pretty sure the Jackrabbits may be the only team that's ever actually done it. Last year.
I was wondering if anybody else has ever done. Maybe UND in the past is the only one I could think of that might have pulled it off.
I don't think they have. I know that. I know they split one year. There was a playoff year in like the 90s where they split one year. Remember, UND had like a 15, 16 year losing streak. Maybe like Pitt State or some of those D2. There were D2 teams that they would have, but I don't know. Either way,
the list
is no, because sometimes they would play a non-conference game against somebody like a Pitt State, or you saw that a little bit. It's not quite like now where like the NSIC where like everybody plays everybody because the conferences are so huge.
Right.
And sometimes, yeah, I mean, and there were even years I remember, I think, where I heard SDSU and USD played each other twice a year, and one was like considered a non-conference game. So, well, like I said, I know there was a year where UND beat them in the playoffs, but they had lost to them in the regular season. So I'm pretty sure they, at least during the 90s, I don't know, you'd have to go farther back, but I don't. Either way, the list of teams that have beaten North Dakota State 2 times in 1 year is probably very thin. Like maybe 2 or 3 teams, and we know one of them was last year. And it's probably like list of teams in the modern era to do it is probably just SDSU. So it was going to be it was going to be tough. But I mean, the reality is North Dakota State just has improved. I mean, I don't know if they're as good as they were today, because I still saw a lot of holes from last week. But I think the number one thing that needs to be addressed, because I've seen it on some blog sites, and we know Bison fans they kind of go back and forth with it. I don't think Cam Miller is the problem there.
No.
I think he's good. I think he's really good. I was a critic of him for a while, but man, he looked real. I was impressed with him in the well, and again, some of it, like I said, it didn't help that USD was without their top corner. That hurts. But we know the accuracy. He was hitting deep balls. I think they've gotten a little bit better with some of the receivers. I think Braylon Henderson, I believe is his name, has gotten. I think they've had a couple guys. They've started to have some other guys emerge who are starting to become targets. They've just gotten better. And they didn't play as badly as we expected when they came up here. They were never in it, really, but I think that game at least maybe kind of gave them a little sense that maybe there's still something here. And then they go out and they beat a good SIU team, and they mop the floor with UNI. They certainly got fortunate against Montana State. I think if Tommy Millott doesn't get hurt, they're sitting at home. Certainly if Montana State has a kicker, they would have been the Bobcats and the Coyotes. And as it turned out, I think we even speculated about this last week. Maybe Montana State would have been the better matchup now for the Coyotes, because they wouldn't have had Millott, and Chambers would have been banged up. But,
here's my cautionary tale for NDSU fans and smiley face for SDSU fans. If you look at this, the NDSU and Montana game, if you're hoping to face Montana instead of NDSU for whatever your reason, and you're an NDSU fan and you're really confident now going into the Montana game, it reminds me a little bit of last year on the SDSU side of a bracket in the quarterfinals, similar to this year for SDSU with this game against Villanova. Had a tough game against Holy Cross. People started doubting them. What's going to happen? Oh, they had let Holy Cross hang around. Holy Cross isn't that good. Kind of a little bit similar with, the game against Villanova. Oh, well, you're favored by 20 points. You should have won by that. And I get it. It is what it is. But Montana State the week before destroyed William and Mary. Absolutely murdered them. And the week before that, William and Mary murdered whoever they played, and Montana State struggled with I don't remember who it was who they played. And then it went down the line. So William and Mary killed somebody. Montana State struggled. I think it was Weber. And then Montana State murders William and Mary. SDSU struggles. SDSU murdered Montana State.
And that might have been Montana's mulligan game the other night. I mean,
right.
We see that happen. The one I can think of that maybe even more pertinent is to go back to that 2001 fall season, because NDSU is now the second unseeded team to get to the semifinals here in the last 3 seasons. Obviously, SDSU was the other one. I think the only other unseeded team now to do it was Youngstown back in 16 when they made or I think it was 16 or 16, I believe, when they made the run all the way to the title game. But I think this one's very pertinent. Obviously, we remember SDSU go out to Villanova, ironically, win that one 35-21. And it was tied, but I thought SDSU really looked like the better team. And I thought they looked like they were just kind of mopping them by the end of that game. And I remember Montana State. Well, actually, I'm trying to think who it was. No, actually, I take that back. Different one I'll give you an example of was how many times did NDSU beat SDSU? Yeah, we get it. A little different advantage. You're in Fargo, blah, blah, blah.
It's 3. It's only 3.
Yeah. It was the 3 playoff games. Well, or was it 4?
I mean, unless I go back to the D2 games, but in the modern era.
Because there was 12, 14, and then 12, 14, 16, 18.
Yep.
So, but no, the one I was going to say, actually, I messed this up because I'm getting the years confused. The first time SDSU ever made the semifinals was in 17 with Goddard and Winnicky his last year. Yep. Of course, they went to James Madison. Jacks looked great against what had been a good UNI team at home. And James Madison, we knew they were good, but the week before they barely got by Weber State. And I think it was an unseeded Weber State. Might have been unseeded. They might have been 8, whatever. Weber should have won that game. Man, Jason's going nuts. I don't know what's going on there with Jason. That just kind of caught my eye. But Weber should have probably won that game. And if they had, SDSU would have been hosting the semifinal against them. And we all thought, well, maybe James Madison's just not that good. Maybe the Jacks can. Well, what happens? Well, the Jacks actually won that game at halftime, but that was the 10 turnover game, and it ended up being 51-17. And you suddenly realize that, just because they maybe don't look good one week doesn't mean it's going to carry over the next. Sometimes these teams get that mulligan game. Yeah, the 10 turnovers, but they didn't look good. They didn't look good, that good defense. And some of those were certainly, what's the tennis term? What's the tennis term for an error that you commit yourself?
Unforced error.
Unforced error. Yeah, certainly some of those errors were unforced by SDSU. They weren't. James Madison didn't have anything to do with that. Yeah, we shall not talk about the 2009 Montana game. I get that, but and we've got a touchdown for Albany.
Wow.
Ooh. Wow. So this is
plenty of time.
Plenty of time, and I'm guessing they'll go for 2 here to go up by 6. Although I don't think that really makes much of a difference because then you could still kick an extra point and beat them. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where you thought the week before they looked so bad against Weber State. And okay, SDSU doesn't have to play otherworldly, and then of course their defense. And then you go there and you're like, okay, there's 25,000 people there, and it was a pretty tough time, but. Yeah, I mean, and there just tends to be these games where teams can look that way, and again, just I don't know what there's a lot of the situation might have been a little too big for USD. I think that's fair to say too, especially once it got away from them. There's a lot of things that went into that game today. I still think there are holes there that that USD could have exploited. They didn't. And I think Montana, I mean, we know Bergen's electric. I think McDowell being a guy who can run. I mean, we know that about Bauman. That's something they're going to have to figure out at USD as we said. They had to be a little more conservative this year because they knew they did, they're kind of in a rebuild phase with a new offensive coordinator, but they're going to have to figure out a way to unleash him a little bit more because he's got one of the best arms in the conference. You're going to have to be a little more let him throw a little more. You can't necessarily hold him back forever, but he's not a mobile guy. McDowell, if he is pressured the way Bauman was today, will take off and run. That was a big reason that Malott had a big game, was the Bison brought pressure. He was able to break stuff right up the middle. Yep. McDowell, I haven't seen as much of him, but he can run. So that will be an element that the buy, and we've seen with the Bison, even the best Bison defenses had trouble with guys like Taron Christian, who could break contain. That's what somebody had said. It didn't matter when Chambers came in. It did, because I realized they scored on the first play of that overtime, but they had another drive at the end of regulation where they were getting down there and it got stopped.
Well, he was already banged up.
Yeah, and Chambers was hurt too. Both their quarterbacks were hurt, in part because of this stupid system where they're running him 25 times a game. We can talk about that all day. And also, by the way, I guess for an update too, it doesn't look like the injury to Malott is super serious. Like, apparently he's avoided some kind of thing that would keep him out, at least if you believe what they're reporting, that it's going to be something that would keep him out long-term into next year. So, although I think if they're going to keep running the system, they're just delaying the inevitable at this point. Yes. They've got to find a way that you cannot run. It will work against the Idaho States and the Cal Polys and the teams that are not as physical. But when you're playing Montana, or I'm assuming when Eck kind of gets what he wants, and I'm assuming Eck will have a very physical team eventually when he gets his program built to where he wants it. Or when you get to the playoffs and you're playing the most physical teams out of the Valley, it's not going to work. You're going to kill the kid. And it's happened twice. He's been hurt in 2 playoff games against NDSU. The first one was the title game, and that was fluky, like Gronowski. He just kind of twisted a leg. That was a fluky thing where he tore his ACL or whatever. But it's no fluke when you run a guy 25 times and he's getting bashed and finally he doesn't get back up. So
what I'm wondering, like, 2 things. Yeah, and I'm going to answer really quick on this. Who do we want, the dogs or the potatoes, for Albany and Idaho? I personally would prefer Idaho, just because in the event we have a weather game like today again, I think I would prefer to face Idaho in that matchup. And I think the guys would like to play Idaho. I think they would get to play against Eck. However, beyond that, what we were talking, I look at like what USD did this year, and we know that college football is a copycat league, right? And for the longest time, it's been going more and more spread, up tempo, up tempo, up tempo. Well, now we have this change happen with the clock and how that's ran, and all of a sudden you're able to steal huge amounts of clock from the game from the game. And before it was, you want to be NDSU, you want to be in SDSU, emulated what they did and have become very good at it. But that was something that you had to do at a high level of investment, high level of program, not something that a lot of programs could emulate around the country where they have a lot of athletes. However, if you're a smaller school, like USD is not in a advantageous spot. They have a tough time. Your in-state rival is considered a vastly superior program just because it is. I mean, you can't, it's undeniable at this point in time. Then up the road from them, you've got the greatest football dynasty in the history of collegiate football happening. And then arguably your other rival, the other flagship of their state, up until this year was probably the better program if you looked at it that way, just more consistent, things like that, better facilities, all that jazz. So if you're an underfunded program, or not necessarily underfunded, but you're a smaller program, you're looking for a way to quick start having success, I think you look at what USD did and build yourself a decent defense, steal possessions, and work your way. And it was almost, I don't want to say triple option-esque, but it's a way for a team to be able to become successful a little quicker while you build around that and get your athletes and build your lines and all the things you need to do to be a championship program and all that. And I also wonder, or almost think, you look at some of these the old triple option teams that got cut out because they can't run you can't cut block anymore. If you look at what Montana State does and go, you know what? Let's get 3 or 4 running quarterbacks on the roster and be okay with them getting hurt, and we'll run that offense instead of the triple option because it's not that much different, and we'll go from there. So that's just something I've noticed. I'm wondering if that becomes more of a fad, particularly the USD slow it down, get the lead, run the clock, get to the end and win by a couple points, which would be a huge swing in the direction of college football. Oh my Lanta.
Speaking of swing, yeah, that might be the thing that swings this game.
That keeps going.
Wow.
I think I'm assured to be perfect on my picks this week against the spread. So boom, I should have parlayed that.
Well, I don't know. You're asking me who you call them the potatoes. They are the Vandals, but
yes.
Well, and I did ask. I forgot to. I hate to say I forgot to ask Jimmy, but I'm pretty sure he would not have given me much of an answer because he's just
right.
I would have had to figure some way out. I wasn't going to ask him like if I'd asked him if he's rooting for Eck, he would have said I'm not. He would have given me some. I don't root for anybody. I'm not. Whatever.
Yeah.
He would have given me some Bill Belichick style answer. I know he would have. So I would have had to figure out. I was so busy trying to figure out how I'm going to ask something that might get an answer that I forgot to ask the damn thing altogether. But I think I was just going to ask him. I'm like, maybe something like, so do you ever pay attention or did you ever think when you were coaching the spring games, it'd be kind of cool to maybe actually do this against him for real one day? Something like trying to find some backdoor way to get him to answer it. Without getting him to answer it. But it may not be an issue at this point because the Vandals are going to have to get a stop and then hold them to a field goal. If you hold them to a field goal, you're still within 7. But
stop me if you've heard this before. A big, crucial turnover by Giovanni McCoy in a big game.
Yeah, I mean
the same thing against Montana in the
irony,
Gibby Dome in that game.
I mean, that's really where the seasons for those two teams turned around, wasn't it? I mean, because it looked like Idaho was the team that was steamrolling to be, I think we still thought at that moment Montana State was probably 2, but we thought Idaho was 3 and Montana was a fraud. And and to be fair, Idaho almost came back and they held on by the skin of their teeth at the end, but goodness. And yeah, I agree with Lyndon. Jason's done a great job there. He could be in line for an FBS job if he wants it very soon. I would also be worried about the portal coming after Hatton, even McCoy, despite how rough he's been in some of these games. So, I mean, that's the other thing you got to start thinking about. That's the other thing about the NDSU game. That obviously, that was one thing we speculated, too, is like there were so many distractions going on around that program. Are they going to be able to actually just rein it all in? Because I've frankly wondered sometimes if Entz does a good job of that. I see it so many times when he's like, I feel like they get so caught up. I know Matt Zimmer had that article about how SDSU's developed. So many of these guys were just walk-ons. And I feel like here's Entz, who's always kind of in some way flaunting, I fly around on my jet, and here's our recruiting rankings and this and that. And then you're wondering, well, where aren't these guys playing? It's like, I feel like he's more the guy who kind of lets some of these outside things come in and maybe be a bit more of a distraction than they should be. And after everything that was going on this week with fans complaining about the ticket thing, the ticket gate at USD, there's a vote going on to expand and renovate the Fargo Dome. There's this portal thing, which never really developed, but could still develop. I mean, they had that collective meeting, which was apparently pre-scheduled, but sounds like it was kind of a DEF CON. We got a big 2nd and 10 coming up here. They better get so they're gonna about 3rd and 5 here after they use the timeouts, and they're not in field goal range. So
nope, not yet.
Not yet, but if they get a first down, then you don't have really any timeouts left. But there was just so much flying around NDSU. You almost wondered, like, are they gonna? I mean, and I know they had the revenge angle too, obviously, but there's just so much flying around, and they were going to be the team that everybody was expecting to win anyway. It's just you wondered how they were going to hold everything in, and they obviously did.
So I got to ask it. Well, you weren't there either. Did you see any of the pictures of the Dakota Dome crowd?
I've seen pictures. Yeah, I saw. We had a reporter there taking photos, and I mean, it looked fairly. There was the one section that looked like NDSU had about 1,000. That's the visitors' side. I think that's about the same side where SDSU had most of their people the previous game. But
right. Because I was more because I saw like the picture. Sam Herder was in attendance there for Hero Sports, and he put up a picture at kickoff and all that stuff. And just from that picture, it looked like there was a lot of empty seats. And 99.9% of the time during the playoffs, those are the most honest numbers on the planet. Unless
got it.
Unless you call a sellout.
There's the first down.
Because if you call a sellout, now you have to give that revenue to the NCAA or their cut of it, which is an absurd amount and needs to be reworked. But you're kind of forced, your hands forced to call it a sellout of attendance for that. So I was just curious, and I totally forgot that you didn't make it down there, and so it was kind of
yeah. I mean, I'm looking at and by the way, I was reacting here. The Albany quarterback with just a heck of a run to pick up the first down. I'm looking at a photo here.
Reminds me a little bit of Mark.
A little bit, yeah. He's a skinnier version, so it's not quite over yet. Idaho has a timeout. They're going to burn it right here. Looks like Albany just got about a 1-yard run, but they're up against it now. There's 138. If you stop them twice and hold them to a field goal, you're going to get the ball back with maybe 20 seconds, 15 seconds. It's bleak. I'm looking at a photo right now from our reporter. Shows the old dome side, and the old dome side looks. This was right at kickoff. The old side looked packed. Like I can't see. It cuts off maybe one corner, but obviously you see the NDSU. I mean, it's full all the way. I can't really see the new side, although that's usually the new side is the one that's always got the most fans on it. When the
is the new side the one that the Coyote sideline?
Yeah, that's the new sideline, and that's where their locker room's underneath it as well. But yeah, usually the old side is the one that I think has when they don't, obviously when it's not a full venue like it is, or if it's not close to full, the older side is the one that doesn't have as many people that tend to get on it. But obviously it's also kind of tough to tell because we know I'm sure it started emptying out in the second quarter once it got up to 28-3.
Right.
Now I need to look at that Herder. I mean, it was certainly I think I had the broadcast on in my car as I was coming back on my speakers, and I got to look at that photo Sam took.
I don't know.
He was taking video. I mean, it's hard to. I mean, yeah, it kind of looks like there's some. I don't know. You never know if people are still coming into their seats, or maybe they.
Right.
I don't know. Those photos are always a little weird to tell at this point. I mean, now I'm taking a look at you took video too. I mean, yeah. I mean,
I was just curious. It's not super important. I was.
Well, I mean, it's just full. I mean, it looked full. I mean, yeah.
One of those things. You do it at kickoff. People are dragging in from tailgating and everything like that. I always feel your best assessment's probably mid-first, mid-second quarter and all that stuff. But in the end, it doesn't matter that much. Here's a big positive for SDSU if Albany wins this game. If Albany wins, they've already had to go to Idaho.
Now they got to go back across country.
Go back, short week.
I feel like I'm doing a dance here.
Right.
Like a dance.
Hey, Macarena.
I feel like they might as well just stay in Omaha. They might as well just go to Omaha or Des Moines and stay.
Right.
See if somebody. I mean, I guess they're probably in finals because I think that's gonna be one thing that'll hurt SDSU a little bit. I think the students let out on Wednesday. So, although I guess a lot of SDSU students are probably.
I bet there's a school in Vermilion that would be happy to let them use their facilities to try to knock off SDSU.
There it goes. There you go. My feed's a little ahead of yours. I apologize. Albany. Well, that's too bad for. I do know, like I said, I don't think I got to make this point because I think right when I was making it, they fumbled. Boom! There's a Albany fan in the stands going it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to make this point because I think they fumbled. Right. I did ask Isaiah, and he admitted they wanted they wanted Eck. He was looking forward to that. I think he admitted they were rooting for him, but it ain't happening now. The Great Danes, are coming to Brookings. You're used to playing dogs in the Salukis and the Coyotes. Now you get Great Danes. Yeah. So, what are they? Are they the NEC? Are they the NEC for a conference? I think they are.
Are they what?
Oh, they are the CAA. They're CAA now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're the CAA champs. They beat Nova this year.
Okay, but they haven't always been. Are they? They're pretty recently CAA, aren't they? Though they've been.
They moved up. They moved up. They moved. I think they might have been an NEC team for a little bit.
That's why I keep thinking they're. Yeah, they just. Is this their first year in the CAA?
No, they were in there last year. I don't. All right. Now I gotta look myself.
Well, this is their first CAA title. Okay, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Because they've actually been in for a little while. It was 2013 was when they got into the CAA. Yep. So it's thanks. Yeah, I see that now. I always thought of them as an NEC team, I guess. They were in that league for about 13 years, and I just never. Obviously these conferences have shifted so much, and the CAA. This is big for the CAA too, because they've had they're kind of on the SoCon. They've kind of been angling toward where the SoCon is, just having their guts ripped out here the way that the SoCon did when Georgia Southern and App State and all those schools got lifted. Obviously we know Delaware's on its way out now. This is going to be huge for them.
I know. Hopefully
that run ends on Friday.
So here's a wild stat for you I'll give this one to you for free. I saw it on ESPN. Their coach, they reinstated football in the 70s. Their current head coach is only their second coach they've ever had since then. They had Bob Ford as their coach all the way through 2013 from the 70s. Holy buckets.
Was that the guy who killed Jesse James?
I think he's the guy who
Robert Ford, the coward Robert Ford.
Right.
Might be. He's that old.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yes, no, you did. I remember listening, Zach. I listened to your pod.
Well, I think some people dismiss. I think some people kind of maybe dismissed him a little bit because a few years ago, I know they went up to Fargo and got trounced, but that's no sin. A lot of those teams go up there and they were still kind of in a bit of an infancy. I think at that point they weren't. Yeah, they're.
Well, CAA got a bad image after the last playoffs when every one of their teams besides Richmond got murdered when they got none of the games were 3 scores, and then nobody could watch them.
This playoff didn't start well for them. The first round, all their teams were losing at the very start of it. It looked like they might go winless in the first weekend. They rallied and were able to get out, but it looked like they were going to have a horrible playoff. And now all of a sudden, you had Villanova make a very good run at SDSU, and now they're going to get another team that'll come into Brookings. And, I've heard that. I think I haven't answered yet, about who I think would be the better matchup for SDSU. And
I like it just because of the defense. I think Albany has a better defense than Idaho, and Idaho's offensive line has gotten shredded now the last 2 weeks. And I would have loved that matchup for the Jacks.
But I still fear. I guess the part I fear is just the Eck factor, knowing his old team,
right?
Knowing the people there, but that only goes so far anymore. It feels like they've just been kind of running on fumes, and obviously the tank is empty at this point right now, and unless they can really pull some miracle right now, they got 35 seconds left, and the funny thing is they do better when they're down by 10 with a hopeless situation as they're trying to. It is still going. They're down inside the 30, but it's pretty much over. Yeah, this is This is huge for them. I mean, they've got to score a touchdown, get an onside kick. All they got to do is get a touchdown and a 2, get an onside kick, and hope their kicker can hit about a 50-yard field goal. I mean, that's about
he
it.
hit the crossbar at 52.
It is
but
indoors.
He's also 1 for 4 tonight. So, I mean, they were long.
Now they're actually kicking the field goal now. They kicked the field goal now, so he hit the 50-yarder now.
Oh,
it's 30 to 22.
Pull that up. All right. Now
I might be a little ahead of you, so I'm a little surprised. So now they're going to go for the onside.
Okay.
So he just hit the 50-yarder.
Here we go. I'm 41 seconds left.
I'm about 16 seconds ahead of you. That's why I'm seeing it, so I'm spoiling it.
Whoa.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting that he did it already. I guess I'll try not to give it away if something crazy happens here.
If you think it's going to burn less time, I guess. To quick get that out of the way, get the ball again, and then you're just focused on the touchdown.
I mean, you got no timeouts,
Because if you go down, then it automatically makes it 4-down territory when you're going to score. Because otherwise you go down and you end up in a 4th and 8 on the 20. You wasted all this time getting down there to kick a field goal. You've got to get it on that one.
Do you want me to spoil it or not?
I'm guessing Albany recovers the onside kick.
Yeah.
I'm good at this. All right. We don't need to share.
Well, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, this is a pretty hopeless deal, but yeah, they've
redemption recovered for Chavez though. Good for him.
24 seconds left. They're gonna unless who are those guys at the Meadowlands unless Joe Pisarcik and who was actually Larry Zonka was actually a great running back. Larry's who won Super Bowls when he was with the Dolphins and then got banished to the Giants. Unless those two show up for the
SDSU Hall of Famer Jim Langer.
Yeah, and then he left Jim Langer, and then that happened to him. So, yep, they've taken the knee, and that is it. It's time for me to
button it up.
Send the customary tweets.
I just saw it pop across my screen here. Apparently, Albany was also 3-8 last year. So,
wow,
what a turnaround!
Well, I remember. I think their coach actually in the National Coach of the Year voting, he finished.
He was up.
I think he finished second. Now. I think he finished above Hawk. It was Jimmy, Gattuso, Hawk, and Nielsen, or it might have been Jimmy, Hawk, Gattuso, and Nielsen. I know we know Nielsen was fourth. We know obviously Jimmy was first. I think Gattuso, who was the Albany guy, might have been second. I have to double check that, but got to put this in.
So we know the matchup. We know the time. They're doing a full spread of tailgate. 1 o'clock. Jacks fans, if you're looking to go, you can start tailgating. We can tailgate all day. Well, 1 officially. Students are gone for finals. We're going to be leaning on our the fans, all of us adult fans, to cover it. I got a feeling there won't be a whole bunch of students there. So we're going to be leaning on the adult fans this time. There was a decent amount of them at this game, but
yeah, a lot of them left it. Although I guess I can't. Yeah. Part of me does not blame anybody who wanted to leave that game.
There are 0 college kids that show up to one of those games properly dressed to last 4 quarters.
Right.
And if their liquid coat that they imbibed wears off at half, they're doomed and leaving.
Yeah.
So it should be a big game. Albany's got a good defense. Obviously, holding Idaho, who does have a potent offense to just 19 points. And I didn't watch every second of this game, but I did say early in the game, man, if Idaho can't run the ball, it's going to be a long game. Like Idaho basically gave up on running the ball at all. And it sounded like they popped off a couple explosive runs, but they could not run with any regularity. They're pretty one-dimensional. So Albany's going to have the defense that is capable of that coming in. And obviously, as we saw in the last quarter of that game, they can hit some deep throws down the sidelines.
Wanted to address it. Seth, you are right. Herman Edwards was the guy who returned the touchdown at the Miracle of the Meadowlands, but it was Joe Pisarcik and Larry Zonka who fumbled that allowed him to return the Miracle of the Meadowlands. That was apparently an era where they for whatever reason frowned on taking a knee, or that wasn't in the lexicon. I don't know. I don't know that history of that too
might not have been allowed back then. I mean, I know what there was a stretch of time in the NFL because I used this is what my dad would have me watch from like knee high up was Sports Illustrated's Crunch Course. And there was a stretch of time in the NFL where you weren't down when your knee was down. It was when your forward progress was stopped. So you just kept going until and that was a bloodbath, as you can imagine. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was, and face masking was legal. Like it wasn't illegal to face mask. You could leg whip people and crazy stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a thing where you couldn't take a knee.
Yeah, you might be right. And then I was going to say the other thing too that I saw. Zach mentioning Gattuso being number one. I said this about the national thing. And I said it when Nielsen won the Coach of the Year in the Valley. I'm like, just because he won the Coach of the Year in the Valley doesn't mean Jimmy might not win the Coach of the Year nationally. People got to understand that. And again, I've said this. We said this when we kind of had the little mini debate at the end of the season. National awards work differently. You're talking about national voters who are guy in the Northeast has probably not watched much Valley football or does not pay attention. Guy on the West Coast probably hasn't either. They're probably just looking at raw numbers, raw stats, whatever. That's again. I said it with you. It's pretty fine. I would have been fine with. Again, you shouldn't take it that seriously. These are just because I know those two coaches don't take it that seriously. They might get a little extra bump in pay if they have an incentive for it in their contract. So I'm sure they appreciate that. But but yeah, I think you got to understand that they just. I would have been fine with Nielsen winning it, or Jimmy. I think they were both deserving in their own ways. Kind of funny that it works out that way, but yeah, I think a lot of people nationally probably just looked and said, "Oh, they're the undefeated team; they deserve it." And I think if you look at the full body of work, it makes sense because obviously they had an undefeated season within the conference. One guy took his team from 2-6 to 7-1, so a little bit more of a turnaround there. And so, but again, that is a different. National things are different. It's the same thing with the Peyton. I think Gronowski should win it. And again, full disclosure, I don't have a vote in any of this either. I think Gronowski should win it, but the other two guys probably have better stats. In fact, one of them is transferring to Minnesota. So, and I don't think the other two guys are on playoff teams even at that. So, and bear in mind, Mark's stats would be better if he hadn't been pulled in games where they're blowing people out. So, and Jimmy's addressed that too. He had some rather passionate remarks about it here this last week, which I was kind of surprised that he I kind of figured he would just be like, it's a team thing, no, we don't really care that much. No, he went pretty, it would be awesome. I hope he does win it. And I think that would be, it'd be great, but it's not going to shock me if it goes to somebody who people just looked at and say, oh, this guy's got great. I mean, Chris Streveler should have won it in 20. I think there's a lot of Jack fans here. Is any Jack fan really going to disagree that Chris Streveler probably didn't deserve it in 2017 over the Sam Houston guy? I mean, it's just such a statistical driven award. But, sometimes they get it right. A lot of times they don't. It's 50-50. So, but yeah, I think Gattuso, now he's really making a case for because same thing, 3-8 turnaround. Maybe that league's not as good as the Valley, but at the same time, now he's really proven it by going on the road and doing this.
Winning at Idaho. So on you were talking about the Miracle at the Meadowlands and why they didn't take a knee. The Miracle at the Meadowlands is what spurred the change to taking a knee. Prior to that, due to just general in the early days, you would do that because the score clock wasn't accurate enough to keep track of the clock. So you'd run dives and quarterback sneaks after 2 minutes under 2 minutes. And that kind of just continued until 78 when the miracle at the Meadowlands happened. So just out here educating people. I am with you though on the coaches thing. And honestly, having seen SDSU fans, we should be more comfortable with the concept that it's generally the guy with the stats that win. I'm shocked, honestly, that Mark is in the top 3, not because I don't think he's the best player, but because we've seen this happen over and over and over again to those NDSU teams where, there's a reason there's no SDSU player up for the Buchanan Award, because the holistic defense is so good. Nobody has the stats to stand out like that.
I mean, not one player on SDSU's defense was in the top 30. And they're
right.
they're one of the best, part of that, I think is mainly if Adam Bach had been healthy, I think that would have been Adam Bach, but this is one of the top defenses in the country, and not one player is in the top 30. That makes little to no sense, but again, it's a team thing, and but yeah, you're right there. I mean, the only guy I can think, I don't think Stick won. I don't think Stick won it, even though he was really good in his final year. Don't think Wentz won it. The only guy
never won it. Wentz never won it. Wentz
the only guy who won it. Yeah, the only guy who won it was Lance, and he had a season that was just impossible to. His season was statistically stupid, so you couldn't ignore his. But yeah, Jensen. You can't tell me Jensen or Wentz or Stick couldn't have won it.
I don't think they've ever had a Buchanan Award winner either, have they? And those are some of the greatest FCS defenses of all time.
Maybe Emmanuel.
Yeah, Emmanuel might have.
I'll Google that while I have a minute. Buck Buchanan. I think they've had at least one, but you're right. You're right. They've had those.
Yeah, the moral of the story is I'm surprised Jimmy won Coach of the Year. I'm very happy for him. Obviously.
Certainly very cool that he follows a Stig right away. Yep, Emmanuel, by the way, did win it in 2014.
Right.
He won it for them, and obviously, neat thing was too. Obviously, the guy from Illinois State last year, Zeke Vandenberg, won it from Illinois State last year. Guy from Northern Iowa won it in 2016. So there have been some guys actually who've won it from the Valley. Yeah, but yeah, the one NDSU one was Emmanuel, and that made sense. 2014. We've got the Walter Payton Award here now that I have that.
Did you see the video of
Are you talking about the Howard? This is the Howard coach in girls basketball, or we're
the video of McCormick that Mike Golick Jr.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, the pancake
destroying that little middle linebacker. God,
some interesting videos shared in the last 24 hours. Yeah,
that's a good one. That is so fun.
That's good too. That you're getting that good that a guy like that notices, because that's one more dude who's going to get his name out there.
Yes, and that helps. You can't say that's not going to help for his future beyond SDSU. So that's awesome.
No. I think they're
beyond
securing,
that.
I think they're securing themselves.
I don't have much else. I guess, but
I think now that we've got the matchup set, I think it'll be interesting. Yeah, I just don't imagine SDSU's losing their final home game, and I have a feeling it'll. For whatever reason, the quarterfinal round has always been the tough one for SDSU. They've never had. I don't feel like they've ever really had. I guess the only easy one I can remember was maybe the UNI game in 2017.
New Hampshire game was a blowout in the quarter.
Oh, that was New Hampshire. I forgot because UNI was the one. Yep. Yeah, they've had a lot of difficult. They've had a lot of them that have been pretty difficult in the quarter, and obviously these games with Villanova have been difficult in their own right. But and I'm just looking now at the winners of the Payton Award. The last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 have been quarterbacks. The last non-quarterback to win was Cooper Kupp in 2015. And before that, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 quarterbacks. Yep. So basically, you've had like 18 of the last 19, 22, 18 of the last 20 guys have been quarterbacks winning it. It was Lindsey Scott last year, who we almost saw in the FCS title game. with Incarnate Word. Eric Barrier.
Eric Barrier. That dude was a stud.
Cole Kelly, Southeast Louisiana.
Yeah.
Certainly Trey Lance. Devlin Hodges from Sanford. The one that robbed Strevler was Jeremiah Briscoe, who won it in back-to-back years.
Yep.
Who I don't think I don't know if he ever got a sniff at the pros.
Yeah, he robbed Stick. I think he robbed Stick and Strevler back-to-back years.
I don't know if he robbed Stick, because Stick's senior year was only in his first full year as a starter, because then it was 2016, because Stick's senior year was 18.
So was it Wentz that Briscoe stole it from?
I think he stole it. I don't know who he would have stolen it from in 16, because 16 was the year that Wentz had graduated and Wentz left in 15. And obviously Cup, you can't say he stole it. Cup stole it from him. No. Cooper Kupp was worthy.
It was a legendary career.
Yeah. But yeah, Villanova quarterback actually won it in 2014. John Robertson.
Yeah.
Jimmy G won it in 2013.
Yeah.
Garoppolo, Taylor Heineke in Old Dominion, 2012.
Yeah, remember him.
Bo Levi Mitchell from Eastern Washington in 2011. Yep. Jeremy Moses from Stephen F. Austin, 2010. Armonte Edwards, back-to-back years from App State.
That guy was insane.
Yeah,
so
he was incredible.
What do you think the spreads will be on these games this weekend? I think I'm gonna go, because SDSU's lines have been absurd for this whole stretch. I'm kind of going to go with Garrett Meyer on that one. I think it's going to be 15.5, maybe 16.5. However, I think Montana's going to be favored by 2.5. Because you got to remember, part of those lines is to get people to bet, and they know people will throw money on NDSU if they're not favored. So I think it'll be Montana by 2.5.
I think that 14.5, 15.5 line is probably about right for SDSU. I mean, it'll, want to see what also got to look at the weather. I mean, that maybe they'll use that a little bit. So they say, look at how bad the weather was a week ago. If it's, I pull up my handy dandy weather app, because I think I saw there's a chance for maybe some precipitation next week.
Yep.
But it's so far out. I remember last week at this time, I think, and somebody saying Montana's down 2 offensive linemen. We'll see. I mean, everybody's going to hold their injury reports down until the last minute at this point. That's the gamesmanship of it at this point.
So I've got here for the weather report.
Yeah, I think about 2-1 point. It's going to be a very tight line. I think Montana's a slight favorite. Yeah, for sure. I think the day before is supposed to be 50. If I'm not mistaken. So somewhat up close to 50. I'm like, why can't we get that for? Well,
Thursday, the day before is a high of 49, and then the day after, and then it's a high of 39 on Friday. You're looking this far out, it very easily could shift, and
because I don't think the wind was supposed to be this bad. There was no thought it was going to be this blustery and windy. Even 2 or 3 days ago that it was today. This was I mean, upstate New York for football, man, this is kind of wild, because you just don't think of college football in New York. It's never really been a thing. I mean,
it used
to. There are a lot of
7
teams.
blocks of granite. I mean, way back in the day, the 7 blocks of granite at Fordham with Vince Lombardi as one of those guys. When you go in the Wayback Files, back in the days of yore, when Harvard and Princeton and stuff were starting out, that was a big deal. Albany, Georgia. That's fun. Perfect.
Well, we played they played the Long Island Sharks here a few years ago, because they consolidated a bunch of those, and it's that team with the teal or the really bright blue and yellow, which I'm like, it just looked weird. It's like, it seems from Long Island. It looked like they should be coming from they look like Southern, but they're from Long Island. I know Stony Brook, I think, is from, don't know if Stony Brook still has their program or not. They were decent for a little while. They had a playoff team every now and then, but yeah, this is a. I hope they have a media market I can trade some video with, because it's always it's gonna be a little easier to get video from Idaho. They're up in the Spokane area, and it's a little harder to find. But yeah, I think those lines are about right. I think SDSU will be about a 2-touchdown favorite, and I expect Montana to be the. I'm a little I'm not too surprised that SDSU got the Friday one. I'm glad they didn't wait all night like they did last week. That was stupid. And it made sense. It made sense they announced it this time too. Once Montana won yesterday and once SDSU won today, you knew who was hosting, so it didn't matter who won the other two games. You knew where they were going to be playing the next week. So, how many tacos do I eat? Oh, I like
Brian. So Brian does a big smorgasbord with the FCS Fans Nation guys of tacos, and like, my guy does not short on the tacos, and they're not 6 packs in a pound either. These are the real deal good tacos down in Texas. So I recommend not passing that up if you get the invite.
I hope so. I got usually I'm working, but yeah, we'll see if I can manage that. I don't know if I'm working. I gotta be
after the title, I believe it's the night of the title game. I believe.
If I gotta be doing that, I gotta be careful, because then I gotta come out and eat too. I gotta go right on air and I'm filled up. I don't want to be puking or feeling like I gotta go to the bat. I don't want to be pulling a Lamar Jackson and have to go to the bathroom, because I don't think I'd be able to come right back out and perform as is the legend. By the way, somehow Randy Moss did not win the Walter Payton Award.
Well, some of those things, I mean,
how the hell did that not happen?
Don't get me wrong, but if you think of some of the best, just because you were incredible in the NFL doesn't mean you were in college. That's sometimes.
No, but I guess I think his numbers were pretty. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm just going down. I mean, Steve McNair.
I mean, Cooper Kupp is no Randy Moss, and he set and he's an incredible receiver, don't get me wrong, but he's not Randy Moss, and he's blew the doors off of every record the FCS has ever had for a wide receiver, damn near.
Oh yeah, and although to be fair, Jake Winicke's numbers actually were pretty comparable for a while there, but yeah, Cooper definitely trying to look up Randy's college stats. It's kind of tough to find because everybody forgets. Yeah, but
Brian, keep up with your strategy of trying to set SDSU up to fail. You're not going to have money for your tacos. He finished 4th for the Heisman that year. Oh my God! Yeah, he probably should have won.
Well, because they were in FCS 1AA his first year. Because I know there was that whole Randy Moss documentary, the 30 for 30. But he had been bouncing around. I think he was supposed to go to Florida State, and then he got in some stupid legal troubles that probably wasn't. But when he initially went to Marshall, they were 1AA. His first year, they beat Montana for the FCS title, and then they moved up to 1A, and then that's why he was 4th in the Heisman. But he would have been. It was 96 would have been the year that he would have. 96. It went to somebody. It went to Archie Emerson of Northern Arizona, a running back. I want to see what the numbers are.
This is why I like having Blue Blood around, because that man is a walking encyclopedia of FCS football knowledge. He had 90 catches with 1,600 receiving yards.
That was in his career?
I don't know.
Let's see. It says sure. I'm reading the Marshall Hall of Fame page. Burst onto the scene in '96, leading the Herd to a 15-0 record and 1AA title, scoring 29 touchdowns, 28 receiving, 1 rushing, breaking the school record set 56 years earlier. Where's his freaking yardage, guys, for that year? But either way, I think 97. That might be his career number. Yeah, well, 96 was the first year. That was the year they won the. Yeah, 96 was his first year, because that's when they won. They were still FCS. Then they moved up to FBS. Where are his freaking? I don't know. Because that's what. Yeah, that's what I'm reading that directly off the Marshall Hall of Fame page here. It should be. I don't know if they just yeah. I can Marshall Athletics Hall of Fame page. Yeah. First on the scene, 1996, led them to a 15-0 record, and then so who knows? I mean, it's here we are at 1:06 in the morning talking Marshall Thundering Herd football on the SDSU post-game show, and they have not been in the FCS for about 30 years now.
Probably could wrap it up, I suppose, on this. Jordan,
that's probably a good cue as we're trying to figure out. No, early predictions. I still think it's going to be SDSU and Montana. I think what's going to happen and I kind of alluded to this. I know how good I cleaned it house. I alluded to this a little bit, and of course, I think the Albany game off-tracked me a few times, but what happened with SDSU in 2021 was eventually the travel got to be too much. Now, NDSU hasn't had to travel as badly. That for SDSU, they were going, of course, they had the one home game in Brookings. They go to Sacramento, back to Brookings, Philadelphia, back to Brookings, then to Montana. To
they were in every individual continental United States time zone in that stretch.
Now, it's not been as bad for the Bison. You get the home game in Fargo. You go to Bozeman, which is it's not. I mean, that's actually one you could. I mean, I think they flew there, but you could actually probably bus there in about a full day if you wanted to. You fly to that, then you get a bus. Then you do get a bus trip down to Vermilion. That's an easy one, and you take it all the time anyway. And now you take another flight out. I mean, you're not going constantly across the country, but it's still a lot of miles to log. It's a lot of jet lag. I think we know it caught up with. I'm not saying they would have, you got to give Montana State their credit for playing well that game in 2021, but we know SDSU, it contributed greatly to it. So I think eventually, you start to run on fumes a little bit, and I think that starts to catch up a little bit with NDSU against a team that's, frankly, Montana is better than Montana State and is better than USD. They're obviously at this point now anyway. I think the Grizz win a good game, close game in Missoula, and I think the Jacks will take care of business against Albany. And, I like the story, but I just don't think this team is going to lose their final game. Good final game at home. I think it'll be maybe like worst case scenario will be like today where they'll have to, it'll be close for a while, but they pull away and just wear the team down.
Yeah, I will say this. I won't make my predictions yet. We got our picks show on Wednesday. Make sure you follow Zach for all their coverage for Dakota News Now and all that stuff. Maybe tune into Dakota News Now. That'd probably be the best.
We'll certainly have a lot more features with them. I'm in the process of having some of my, like I said, our post-game, pre-game show is up. I've got some more stuff that's should be posting, including we had highlights of SDSU men winning at Wichita State tonight.
Yeah.
Beating Paul Mills. Even big bonus was sending his whining butt with a loss. That was a fun time. But, and like I said, we will have another pre-game show of some kind. We'll announce it at some point. We'll certainly have some kind of live coverage after the game on Friday. It's obviously a little bit busier night, but since we have a little more stuff going on, but it takes a little priority, obviously.
Right.
And then we'll figure out we'll figure that out as we go, but we'll announce it.
Right. I just wanted to say for the NDSU run, because I'm not making predictions, but I will say this: if NDSU wins this game now in Montana, the one thing NDSU's never had on their resume is a bunch of wins on the road in the playoffs, because they never had to. They've been in Fargo. That's kind of always been my personal knock on them, is get them out of the Fargo Dome and you don't have to worry about it. Well, tell you what, if they do go to Montana and win, I don't know, you'd have to dig, but that might be the most impressive run to the championship in FCS history to go. I mean, whatever, the Drake game a lot of teams get cupcakes in the
that's
first round, whatever. But then you go to Bozeman, then you go to the Dakota Dome, and as much as I can't stand that dump, it's a tough place to play. We've seen it in person time and time again as SDSU fans. And then go to Missoula. If you win at all three of those places in one run to the title, A, that's probably a bad sign for the FCS, but that's a different conversation. B, that I can't think of any. I couldn't imagine putting together a more difficult run to the national title in the current landscape of the FCS.
Well, and Brian,
unless you go to Brookings.
Garrett kind of, and Seth's mentioning that James Madison maybe played 3 road games in 2004. I'll look that up quick. But and Garrett mentioned it. Yeah, this has doubled their previous amount of road wins in the playoffs. Right. In part, you're right, because they never played that many because they're always in their dome. But their only other road win was, ironically, in Bozeman in 2010. That was their first FCS playoff because they got in kind of at the last minute. They didn't really think they were going to get in. I think the field was only 20 teams at the time. It wasn't as large. But they got in. They won a first-round game. They went to Montana State, who was a pretty big favorite and won the Big Sky under Rob Ashe. And they really kind of – it was a tie game for a while, and they just kind of overpowered. It was somewhat similar in the fact that their quarterback didn't throw for many yards in that game. They just ran a lot of power, and they ended up winning like 42-17. The next week, they go out to Eastern Washington. There was some controversy there. Bison fans will still insist they should have won the national title that year, even though that would have only been the quarterfinals, so they still would have had to win 2 more. And then beyond those 2 games, their only other road game was the spring season at Sam Houston, which they were still close in that one, even though they refused to acknowledge that the spring season ever happened. And right. without that spring season, you don't have Cam Miller. Let's just be honest, because they probably would have gone whole. Trey Lance would have come back probably, but Cam Miller never develops into what he was. They probably would have gone with Quincy Vaughn or whatever that guy was from Virginia Tech. Maybe they would have stuck with the Iowa State transfer. So, like I said, that spring season, as much as they poo-poo the thing, I think it had some benefits for them, just because even though they didn't win the national title. But it would be, you're talking about going probably to the 2 attendance leaders in the playoffs in Montana and Montana State. Essentially, all 3 places were sold out. As much as you can say what you want about Vermilion, but that was basically, for them, that was a sellout. I know there were a lot of Bison fans there, but those were 3 of the more hostile environments, 3 of the most attended games of the FCS playoffs thus far. And you're right. It's definitely not the best sign. And we're going to have to deal with the whole, we need to go to FBS crap for, especially if it's the Jack. It'll add some extra spice to the rematch, because last year
there'll be a lot more juice.
Because last year the prevailing, even though I wasn't there, but I heard the prevailing thought was they kind of knew that the real ones who weren't just wearing green and gold blinders or idiots knew that SDSU's got the better team. They should win this thing unless they just fart all over themselves. This time around, I think they'll come out feeling like,
if they don't have hope.
Yeah, this time they'll have hope. If they go through that run, they will absolutely have hope. And coupled with the fact that, obviously today SDSU had a tougher time. They're going to think, and they're going to feel like they're due. And that would be fun. I, for one, would, again, for the good of the FBS and just to see someone different. And because there is some interesting history with Montana, even Jason Hove brought up, we think about the 2009 game and that recent playoff game. They should have beaten Montana in 1993. Jason Hove brought this up to me in the press box. That was a team with Adam Vinatieri and I think Timmerman on it. And he said they led by this was when they were Division II. They led by 20 in Missoula at that point. And they ended up blowing the lead and losing. And it was a team that I think they finished 7-4. They had a couple of losses like that, but if they had won that game, they probably would have gone to the playoffs that year. I mean, it's certainly beating a 1AA team would have probably gotten them into the playoffs. So and we talked about this at the start of this playoff run. It's kind of the one last demon left to slay for a group that has certainly killed all the narratives. And yeah, I think the NDSU stuff is getting old. So I think it would be fun to see somebody new in Montana, new oldish in Montana, rather than doing SDSU, NDSU for the 800th time. But, we'll see.
And one last thing for the record, JMU beating Lehigh, Furman, William & Mary is not the same stratosphere as going to Bozeman, Missoula.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, we don't – it's tough to compare because we don't know what that was. It was a different era of FCS back then.
I'll make definitive statements all the time.
Yeah, that feels a little – it does feel different. Bozeman and Missoula has always been an animal. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of different. It's tough. 2004 was different. FCS was much different before the Dakotas got here. And, the SoCon back then was probably a lot different. But, yeah, I think Grizz Jacks would be massively hyped. But they'll hype the Dakota Marker, too. NDSU will have ESPN and everybody fawning over them. I mean, and we'll probably get another Bison Jacks national title game again down the road. It's probably inevitable, but for this one, I think we need something different. If that's where it's going.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good way to end it. We've been on for darn near 2 hours. We'll have to figure out what we want to do next week, because obviously I have no idea what I'm doing yet. We know that the last time we had a post-game show at 6 o'clock after Montana State, it went a little weird. And we'll figure it out. Brendan and I will kind of talk and figure out what we want to do. Maybe we get together on Saturday night after the Bison Montana game once we know the title. Maybe we get together sometime on Friday night after everything's settled down. It just I don't know. We'll kind of play that by ear and just let this one sink in for now. But yeah. I wish. Yeah, but yeah, everybody should get that for the good cause. We should do that on. I don't know if they're still going to be open after game time on Friday night, but
get it at lunch before you start tailgating.
Yeah, get it at lunch. Exactly. Get it. I think there's still some basketball games this weekend too. So get up to campus for that. I'll give also shout out to the Northwestern Red Raiders. We're heading back to the national title game. They won today. So the program that seems to mirror SDSU at the NAIA level is trying to run it back as well. So a lot of connections there as well. So good to them. And we'll see you next week sometime. We don't know when. We'll just figure it out. And that's the way the FCS playoffs go. They don't tell you when. They don't tell you where. You just go. And that's how we roll on the SDSU Jackrabbit Illustrated postgame show.